If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Sports Card Nation, the hobby is the people. Weekly news and interviews, it's your number one source. Sports Card Nation, the hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up? Welcome to episode 332 of Sports Card Nation. What do we have on tap today? The conclusion of our conversation with writer extraordinaire. I know I call him that because he's very good and he writes for multiple entities. That's Mr. Greg Bates. This is the conclusion and part two of that conversation. So, quick word from one of our great sponsors, and we'll be back with Greg once again.
Iron Sports Cards is your number one source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
All right, here is the conclusion to our second part of the interview with writer Greg Bates, and we're a lot of heavy national talk right here. So if you know, nationals coming up, and we're really going to tackle a few things about it. So here you go.
I love the National just because it's the one time of the year I get to see a lot of these people who I talk to on the phone and like who I've become close with even as a writer, you know, these TEOs and everything that you don't get to see them much. You get the chance to talk to them, and just, you know, how important it is to see all these people in person. And that's the big thing. I spend, you know, for 5 days I'm there, I spend a lot of that time just walking around and talking to people. If it's, you know, people I haven't seen, or, you know, doing interviews and stuff. I leave like the National last year after like 5 days there, and I'm like, I feel like I didn't get a chance to look at much. Yeah. Because it's just so busy, you know?
Every year I try to like quadrant it out. Like, I'm going to do this section, and that's the goal for today, amongst my other things that are on the itinerary. And like you just said, I always feel, did I see every table? I feel like I did, and I know I did. I don't even, it's not even a feel, like I know I missed something. It's that big. And, you know, someone says I can, you know, someone asked me, John, I can only go for a day. What's your recommendation? And I'm like, it's going to be tough to do everything in a day. So if you only can go for a day, you know, really pick the stuff you want to do. The day goes quick. The day, you know this, I'm preaching to the choir here probably, Craig. The day goes, like, even though it's a long day and your feet hurt and other parts of your body hurt, the time itself goes fast, and it's even the week, you know, even the 5 days, you're like, that's it. And so if you're only going for a day, as a few people, you know, ask me for kind of strategy, I'm like, I said, I'm not trying to tell you to be rude, but if you're going to do a lot of stopping and talking with people, that's going to consume a good portion of your day, and you're not going to see a lot of the tables. So you really got to decide what your goal for the day is, to card shop or you know, socialize. And neither one's a wrong answer. It's just you have one day to, you know, pick one of the two. It's very hard to do both in one day. You can do that in a 5 day span for sure, but in one day it's hard to balance both of those. So for the 1 day folks, I always say you've got to, like, what's the priority? Seeing people you haven't seen in a while and that sort of thing. And you know, I can't, that's for them to answer, but I always, 2 days would be like, you know, someone asked me that question, what's the least amount you could go and still maybe feel like you did most of the stuff? And so 2 to 3 days is my answer there. But if you can go like we do 4 or 5 days, that's obviously the most ideal. But I get it. Not everyone can get the time off. For me, it works nice because I'm in the teaching industry and it's summertime, and so I'm in a sense I'm already off. I mean, I'm at summer school, but it's a lot easier to get out of summer school than regular school year. So I just let them know, hey, these 3 days I'm not going to be in summer school. It's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and see you Monday, and they're good with that. And so I'm fortunate. Not everyone has that luxury, let's say. So it might be, hey, I can take a Friday off and do Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or I got to get on my plane early Sunday, so I only have 2 days. So I guess just try to come up with a game plan as best you can for based on the amount of days you're there. And one day whenever someone says I'm only coming for 1 day, I'm like, oh man, that's gonna be tough. Do the best you can, move at a pretty brisk pace. Yeah, and sometimes if you're there for cards, sometimes you have to wait to get in front of some showcases. So that you lose time there if you're trying to see a certain dealer and their wares and what they're offering. So 1 day is definitely if I only had to go for 1 day, I'm obviously with travel, I'm not going to do that for 1 day. And I like going back to kind of some of the venues you mentioned, Atlantic City and Cleveland. I like them for the selfish reason for me, Greg, is I can drive to them, so I can kind of come and go as I please at my car. Chicago, I'm not going to argue that it's probably the best venue as far as for the logistics of the show itself. But for me, it's 14 hours. So now I have to fly. I can't just, sometimes it's tricky finding a later flight on a Sunday to get there, to stay on a Sunday. Then, this year I'm renting a car, which I haven't done in the years past at Chicago. This year I'm going to do that because I'm staying, a little over 3 miles away from the venue. And I thought about not renting a car. I'm like, well, I could just Uber, but when I figured out what like those Uber each day, it's going to cost what a rental car would anyway. And so you might as well just rent a car, and then you can, help others and your friends rides and people, rides to different events. So I went with the rental car where I hadn't done that prior. So I don't want to say it's an inconvenience. It's an added expense. Let's be honest that, so it's a little more costly to go to Chicago for me than Atlantic City or Cleveland would be. Is it a deterrent? No, but just means I have less money probably for a card or two that maybe I'd buy, if it was in Atlantic City or Cleveland. It's going to be in Chicago this year and the following two, and then we'll see. I know, like you said, you're 3 hours away, so it's ideal for you. Taking that out of the equation, would you like to see it move around more, or are you comfortable with it being, and this is for you personally, like you're fine if it was Chicago every year?
I'd like to go check out different cities and stuff, but you get to know Chicago pretty well too, because it's there every other year at least, right? So you get to know the restaurants, you get to know where to park. It's not the unknown every time you go. I didn't know anything really about Cleveland or the outskirts of Cleveland going there. So you just don't know. With Chicago, we've been there for so many times, right? It's every other year for the last like dozen years, at least 15 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes Chicago permanently. There's been talk about that. You've probably heard that for a number of years. That I don't know if that would take a vote from the dealers or the board or what happens with that. But I wouldn't be surprised if that turns permanent, maybe even after this 3-year stretch, that they get so comfortable, the newer guys get so comfortable in having Chicago that it just turns into that every year.
Yeah, that's just I can't argue the centrality of the city. It's pretty much in the dead center. So for whether you're East Coast or West Coast, you're gonna have to travel similar. If you're obviously in the Midwest or near Chicago, you're probably gonna love that if you're in driving distance. And I get it. I just said how I loved Atlantic City, Cleveland for the selfish reason that I could drive there. It's 5 hours. So I get that. I like seeing different cities. Last year was the first time, like you mentioned, I was ever in Cleveland. I don't. Maybe it's because of where I'm a product of my environment, Greg. I'm a New York City kid, born and raised, so I'm not so much intimidated by a big city where maybe someone else, and I don't mean this like the way it sounds, but someone else who maybe didn't grow up in that sort of setting could be. I get it. So I don't mind like kind of a city I'm not familiar with. But I get it too. I think Chicago is just for dealers, for people who attend the show, it's very popular. I'll say this. I'd rather be in Chicago every year, because that's a rumor I've heard, than the other rumor I've heard where, doing 2 nationals per calendar year. That's something that I hope doesn't happen. We have other shows in other cities, like Atlanta and on the West Coast with Burbank and others, and the East Coast National and White Plains and that sort of thing. I know it's not the same show and not even it's apples and oranges, but now with Fanatics Fest trying to kick off again, and we know they did it in New York. So I'd rather see it in one locale each year, the same one, than to see it like it's going to be in Chicago and, Atlanta, the 2 nationals, the national in end of July and the national in February or November, whatever that they would ever schedule a second one. So that's how I don't want to see 2 nationals, because I feel even if they did that, the bloom would come off the rose, right? The national has that mystique, and it's you circle that week on your calendar every year, and it's really the same week for the most part every year. And you kind of know what days you're going to need to have off or block off on your planner and schedule. And I think if you do 2, you do 2. There's 1 World Series every year. There's 1 Super Bowl. If sports start doing 2 of them, I think it loses the overall luster. So I don't think that's going to happen, but I've heard rumblings here and there. People can say anything, right? Doesn't mean it's the powers that be. So I'll sign up for Chicago every year rather than 2 nationals every year.
In how many, like, if we get 600 dealers at the normal national, how many of those are going to go and do it again? Because a lot of those guys, are pushing 25, 30, 35 years they've been doing this. They're not going to travel more than once a year, right?
Yeah. Well, the other rumor I heard, again, where these rumors come from, anyone can make them up. I don't know if they're coming from, credible sources or just people just planting like thoughts and seeds out there to get that idea rolling. But the one thing I heard is with the 2 nationals, one will be like a vintage heavy national, almost like what Strongsville is, where the vintage dealers will be there and definitely have table there. And the second national, if you want to, whatever you called that, will be more modern, ultra modern, and that sort of thing. The vintage dealers won't feel like they have to be at both places, or the modern dealers won't have to feel like they have to be in both places. So I still don't want to see that. You know what I mean? Like, even if that's the criteria or that's sort of the differentiator between 2 nationals, I just think 1 national, right? If you're going to do, they did that a little bit. Like, if you look at the way it's kind of laid out, you see a lot of the vintage dealers are together. They're not 100%, but there's a good, if you really look at it, it's kind of done that way, whether it's intentional or just because they have the same spot or close to the spot. So I just don't want to see 2 nationals. I think, if number one, I won't be able to attend both, and then it becomes which one do I go to, right? And when there's only one, it's just like, am I going or am I not going? It's pretty cut and dry, right? So I don't want to see 2 nationals, whether that's selfish and most people have asked that question. I don't know if I've even got someone to say that. The only answer I got where they kind of said they wouldn't mind is what I just said. If 1 national was all vintage and the other national was not vintage. And I've had people say, well, I know which one I would have to go to, what I collect. Easy. but I kind of do a little of both. Like I'm not like I'm heavier vintage, don't get me wrong, but as a dealer myself, right? Sometimes I will buy modern or ultramodern, even if it's just for showcase inventory or stuff for myself, for my own shows. So I like the fact that I can go to one national and buy either or if I so choose. I don't really, and just the expense, right? You're going to pay for two shows, two nationals rather than one. And it'd be interesting the corporate, right? If you're Fanatics, Tops, Panini, all the wild card, you go on and on. The grading companies. Now you've got another national to do all the logistics and who's going, hotel, and it doubles your costs, and that stuff adds up even for a big company. I'm complaining as a individual proprietor, but as a bigger company, they might have a staff of 25 to 50 people, so I hope they keep it to one national. If it's Chicago every year, so be it. I'll have to fly, and it is what it is. I'm not gonna. It's not about a pity party, but I like sometimes when I can drive to them too. So if it come back to Cleveland, or like to see it in Baltimore again. I've been to Baltimore, not for the Nationals been in Baltimore, so I didn't attend that, but it's been there before. Maybe someday it could be there again. I'm a person who I like to be fair about it. I'm an East Coast guy, but if I lived on the West Coast, I'd be like, hey, what about us, right? So I like to see it. You travel if it's like you said, Chicago for 2 years, then another city, then back to Chicago, just to get a different look every once in a while. If they want to make Chicago kind of the main home base of it, I'm not going to argue with that. It's proven to be like the consensus favorite. So I just don't want to see two nationals, but they're not asking me to vote on that. So who knows what will come down the pike.
You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
For nearly 50 years, Sports Collectors Digest has been the voice of the hobby, bringing you comprehensive coverage of the sports collectible industry. From industry news, auction results, market analysis, and in-depth stories about collectors and their collections, Sports Collectors Digest has everything you need to know about the hobby. SCD is also your leading source for listings of sports collectible dealers, card shops, card shows, and the latest from the industry's top companies. To check out all the latest news or to subscribe to the hobby's oldest magazine, visit sportscollectorsdigest.com or call 1-800-829-5561.
We are back.
All right, so we're coming down the home stretch here, Greg. You cover the hobby. You see all the breaking news, the stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Does anything, and like you said, you've been in the hobby, you've seen it through the years. Does anything surprise you anymore, or you're at the point where nothing catches you off guard or surprises you too much anymore?
I don't think anything surprises me. No, I think, we've kind of been through it all. I mean, you see stuff like the theft in Dallas at the show and just how elaborate that was with the people and all that. I mean, I don't know if that surprises me, but it's just kind of shocking in that manner that they would go about it and do something like that. I've written stories on forgeries, big forgery stuff. They just arrested the guy in McKinney, Texas, Wendell Rogers, who I wrote a huge story on 5 years ago. We tracked him down, stuff like that. I don't know. You just go through, a lot of these sketchy things in the hobby, and you just try to concentrate on all the good things and all the good people in the hobby. But yeah, I don't think it really surprises me just what happens. It's, we've kind of seen it all in this hobby. And like you said, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and most of it is good, and most of the people are good, and most of them are in it for the correct reasons. But there's always going to be those bad seeds and, everything else who are just in it for the money and everything else. But yeah, I don't know. We've seen it all, and we're going to see it all again, so
yeah,
no, I don't think anything really surprises me with it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and theft and burglaries, that's not just a hobby exclusive. That's any kind of entity or business that
Right.
has money behind it or potential money. You're going to see that. Like you said, maybe the brazenness of some of the more recent thefts and that sort of thing make you, open your eyes a little bit. The one story which happened really recently that really, I guess I'll say surprise, really, the whole cat scanning of cases and boxes, when I was a young kid, I suffered from migraines. Thankfully, I grew out of them, but we couldn't get them under control. I was missing school, and so I had to have my brain CAT scan to see if they could see what was going on or form some sort of plan of attack. So I've been in, as a young kid, a CAT scan. And if you would have told me that, and I was collecting cards as a kid, if you would have told me then that, hey, buddy, they're going to use this machine many years later to kind of see what's in the packs without opening them, I would have thought you were like kidding. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have like thought about that. And yet here, 2024, 25, we're using medical equipment, medical imaging equipment specifically to see what's in a product without having to take the shrink wrap off. And that just shows you like the lengths people will go to, be, deceitful and underhanded to get one up on consumers and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean that's the closest to surprise when that news broke. I'm like, what's next? That was my net line was 2 words, like what's next? Like we're using CAT scan, basically MRIs to look at what's in what are we going to do next? And so that's probably the closest the surprise that I've been. And but again, I've done this for 40 years, so nothing catches me too off guard, but there's just some things that make you scratch your head. And then you got your sad stories too, right? The robbery ring that stole a lot of Yogi Berra's awards and memorabilia from his playing career and not selling it to, but literally melting it for the melt value. Can never get that back. It's gone. That stuff is like the sad stories and that sort of thing. So, but like you said, for every bad story or sad story, there's 10 to 15 great stories of people doing great things or charity work or helping someone else out. And sometimes I think it's something I try to cover. I know you're like that. I do cover some of the bad stuff more as cautionary tales rather than trying to gloss about them. But, I try to definitely cover those uplifting stuff or the better ones because there's a lot more of those. And I think sometimes we don't do enough. And I'm not just talking about us, the hobby in general, that we don't do enough to, cover those type of stories.
Yeah, and that's what I do a lot with Fanatics Collectibles. We write for, a lot about Topps collectors and just like I write about the everyday collector, not the Ken Kendricks of the world or the Marshall Fogels of the world who have just amazing collections and endless money. It's these people that, I wouldn't say they're living paycheck to paycheck, but they have really cool collections and they're budgeting this and, doing that. And that's where all the cool stories come out. And I come up with a lot of those to write about the feel good stuff. Like I just interviewed a guy, story will be coming out, I don't know, next few weeks or so, but had a shop in Colorado had posted and said, this guy's been collecting Topps since 1959. So I contacted him and he's like, well, he said he's 83 and collected from 52 to 59 and then took a little break, had kids and stuff, or took a little break, was in the service and all this. And then 1982, Ripken's rookie year, his son was born. So he started collecting again. So he's been collecting since 82 continuously. Yeah. But, so he had cool stories about it. I asked him, what was it like collecting in 1952 and, him with the bike spokes and making the motorcycle noises and everything else and saying he had all these Mickey Mantles but just to pick, and I talked to the shop owner in Colorado or the former shop owner who's a manager there still at Mike's Stadium Sports Cards in Aurora, Colorado. Yeah. And Mike was just telling me about what it's like to have this guy coming in. And he's like, I don't want it to sound, bad or whatever, but Mike is like, we need to honor these guys. They're almost like veterans who they're a
Yeah,
dying
well,
breed,
listen,
right?
yeah,
It's the World War II
you
guys.
yeah,
So
you just hit the nail on the head of what I was going to say. Is I hope
yeah,
they live as long as they can, but that's not
yeah,
how life works. And to get to
yeah,
talk to someone that can relay those and share those experiences, we're going to run out of those folks. That's just the way it goes.
yeah.
And so to be able to talk to them and get that perspective firsthand, right? That's a firsthand account.
Mm-hmm,
There's going to be a day where there'll be no firsthand accounts. So when you
mm-hmm,
can get them, and I love that stuff because they're
yeah,
few and far between. I had my dad on this very podcast twice
mm,
in 6 years. Not because he was my dad. I mean, that doesn't hurt, but he's 88 years old. He collected,
mm,
and he told stories of that and growing up in Brooklyn and Babe Ruth passing away, or when the Dodgers left Brooklyn and went to the West Coast and people
mm,
crying on the street. Those folks, my dad's 88, right? Those folks there's less of them each and every year to share
mm-hmm.
those stories. And when I was thinking about it, I'm like, I need to have someone on. And I was like, I know this sounds terrible, but I didn't think of my dad like instantly. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I almost was reluctant because he was my dad. Like, if someone say, oh, Newman's having his dad on, but like,
Yeah.
there's very few people who can check those boxes. He happens to be one of them. We just happen to share a last name, and
Mhm.
my dad. So, it was, I loved having him on. The second time I had him on was when Gil Hodges was inducted. He's a Brooklyn Dodgers kid who pretty
Mhm.
much grew up at Evans Field. So I got his kind of thoughts on
Mhm.
Gil Hodges finally getting in. But like you said, those guys are those folks. There's less of them, and so to get to speak to them while they're here, I think and then preserve that history, right? And sometimes we forget kind of what we do. Some of the impact of what we do is we get that's captured forever
Mhm.
for people to read or view or however they consume content. So it's important on both sides, right? It's important for them to share their experiences and their stories, and it's important for us to capture them and and have them have that legacy be told. So I love that stuff, and
Yeah.
the significance and impacts not lost on me. I think it's very important. And
Mhm.
you don't need me to tell you this, but yeah, you're very good at what you're doing and capturing. Well, I appreciate you, Greg. You're a busy guy,
Yeah.
making some time for us and sharing some of your insights and experiences yourself. I always give the guests sort of the last word here. Anything they want to share, websites, social media, where they can see your stuff. Take your time and give that stuff out. Can check it out.
Yeah, so our platform at Fanatics Collectibles, we have a site called Ripped. And it talks about, it does, like I said, collector stories that I do. But it's a lot of educational components as well. Like when 2025 Topps Baseball came out, there's just endless stories about what's in the box. So if it's a collector who wants specific things out of that, hey, the hobby box is for you. If they want this, the jumbo might be for you, or the blaster box might be for you, or cool new inserts. Like I'll talk to like I just did a story on. We don't do a whole lot of F1, but a really cool 101 Max Verstappen was pulled from they call it the helmet collection, and it's a really awesome shot with the gold vinyl like in the background, and it's a cool shot of him with his visor on and stuff. So I ended up talking to like the project the brand managers and stuff for that. How did they come up with this idea, and how was that all done and handed off to the design team and everybody through that? And so you get some really cool like behind the scenes
Yeah,
stuff as well that we're putting out. So obviously we're not putting out real negative stuff because that's not what this is about. It's positive
yeah,
stories, but a lot of stuff obviously, and there's going to be a lot more once Fanatics gets the basketball license, later this year, and then football next year. There's going to be a lot of cool collector stories and stuff like that, but it's just endless stories. But you can find us at ripped.tops.com. And then you can kind of, move over to the top site too and check that out. But a lot of cool content on that. Check that stuff out. You can follow me on X or Twitter. I call it Twitter all the time.
I still
can't get into the X thing. So it's Greg A. Bates at Greg A. Bates for Twitter. So check that out. And I post a lot of hobby related stuff on that too. So yeah, there's my spiel.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate it, and I'll see you hopefully here in jeepers, 4 months, I think, now a little under 4 months in Chicago. Drivable for you. I'm jealous and envious, but it's still the national, right? We still only have one a year, and we circle it every year that week, and it's a blast. It goes quick, and then we start counting the days down to the next one. I'm sure I'll run into you. It has to work out like that. So, but thanks, Greg.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you. Awesome chopping up some hobby with Greg, and check his stuff out. Chances are, if you follow hobby news and read a lot of hobby news, you've read something he's wrote. He's very good at what he does, and various companies utilize his skills. So we'll have him back again, chop up some more, but glad to finally have him on. We're going to hear from our Hobbies the People announcer, some closing thoughts, and wrap up this week's episode.
Time for our Hobby is the People announcer of the week.
Hey everybody, I'm Gary Denier, Thumbs Down Guy. This is the Sports Card Nation podcast. The hobby is for dealers. People.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People announcer of the week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
Hobby Hotline is the hobby's only live interactive call-in show. Join some of your favorite hobby personalities every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, to discuss the hottest hobby topics. If you miss us live, catch us after the fact on all major podcast platforms. Follow us on socials at Hobby Hotline.
Hi, I'm Isaac Alpert, a longtime card collector and the co-founder of the Penny Sleever. My wife and I started the Penny Sleever with a simple premise in mind: to offer collectors top quality supplies at fair prices. We offer a full range of hobby supplies, and we'll get them to you fast. Whether you're looking for a 260-point magnetic for that oversized patch card, or a slew of semi-rigids for your next PSA submission, the Penny Sleever has you covered. Shop now at thepennysleever.com and use the promo code SCNation to get 10% off your first order. That's SCNation for 10% off at thepennysleever.com. The Penny Sleever. Top quality supplies, fair prices.